I think we're moving to an era where technology can really enhance a lot of the things that we do, but we have to be aware of the downsides of this as well. If we become overly reliant on certain technologies, then we're losing certain skills and abilities to do other things. I am definitely an optimist that sees more of the positive potential here, but I'm also very aware of the dangers and downsides of it. At the end of the day, a lot of these technologies that we have in our lives today are fortifiers and amplifiers. They make whatever we want to make easier and better, but this starts with intention. So if your intentions are bad, they can probably also amplify those bad intentions.
So welcome to the Science with Impact podcast, where we help share stories about amplifying the societal impact of STEM research. Today, we are joined by Dr. Leonard Nacke. Would you be willing to introduce yourself for our audience?
Thanks so much for inviting me, Vanessa. I'm a university research chair and professor at the University of Waterloo. I work in human-computer interaction, and I am also building a business online. I help people with academic writing and artificial intelligence, and I hope that this will make people more academic researchers.
So why should our listeners listen to this conversation?
I think the main incentive for people to listen to this conversation is to become more effective in their workflow. We have essentially demonstrated some of the AI approaches that we are using to get quicker results and become more productive. But also for people that are interested in building a personal profile and becoming their own one-person business as part of their knowledge of being academics, to get some inspiration for what is possible, and that it's nice to be a highly published author. So I'm, of course, coming from a position of not somebody that has never seen any publications. I have had huge citations before, but now I'm moving into a world where I'm getting more eyeballs through social media. So I think this is something that is possible for anyone that's interested in increasing the impact of the scientific work that they do. And what we just discussed today is the first step you can take in that direction, and I hope it was useful to you.
I did want to ask you, for our listeners who might not know where Waterloo is, could you give us more context for where Waterloo is?
Waterloo, Ontario is in Canada. It's about an hour away from Toronto, one of our biggest cities here. You could call it a little bit suburban, but it's definitely got a huge influx of tech founders. Basically, from the time that BlackBerry was here. You might remember the days before the iPhone became popular. BlackBerry was a huge tech company and was founded in Waterloo.
How did you get to know me and our company, Science with Impact?
So I stumbled across your profile on LinkedIn. I think we were exchanging some comments back and forth, and it was just really nice chatting with you and finding a fellow entrepreneur and scientist and somebody that really cares about scientific communication, which is also very dear to my heart. And so I was very excited to meet someone like you online.
I feel likewise. I feel like we should highlight your LinkedIn profile because I don't know if people compliment you enough on the posters that you create, but they're so cool. So I'm just going to share that with the audience really
Thanks.
quickly. So this is Dr. Naka's profile. And what I love about it is these posters that you create are so beautiful. There was one that I read that led to our initial interaction about writing research papers and the process of breaking that down. And it seems like much of your work relates to academic writing, integrating AI, and using frameworks to make that process easier. Could you tell us a little bit more about all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of how I stumbled into becoming an entrepreneur. I was basically drafted at some point. So I started an academic sub-community that was focused on the science and research around video games within the human-computer interaction, or HCI, community that I'm a part of. And this led to the building of a conference that's called Kai Play. This is also now attached to a journal. It's become very successful over the years. It's more than 10 years old now. And as part of that, I think 1 or 2 years into the conference, we were thinking about training junior researchers a little bit better in the process of writing for our specific academic community. So I took on the role of writing coach essentially in that regard. And I think this was maybe in 2016, 17, around that time. where I was teaching a full day seminar at the conference for how to write papers. And that was a very exciting moment for me because I felt like I could really give back to the community. I could really help train people understand like what goes into the process. And it was of course aimed at PhD students, early career researchers, and trying to demystify some of these complexities for them. Because as a person that has a background in computer science and engineering, we don't really get trained on writing well. And this is a lot like a really blocked process for us, and so it's really difficult to get a better understanding of that. So that was when the journey started, and then I basically decided this was great, but it was of course a smaller conference. Why don't I go to the main conference in my field? Now, as a computer scientist, main publication venues are conferences. They are not journals as much as they are in other natural sciences where you have Nature and other top journals. For us, it's the Chi conference. This is a really, really big conference in our field. And it's considered top of the line, less than 20% acceptance rate, really difficult to get in there. And so I decided to just apply there and help that larger conference in terms of writing papers. I've submitted the same course every year since. So it's like almost 10 years of teaching this course at the conference. And it's gotten really successful. It's usually like a full day course where people learn all of that stuff. And I synthesized that during COVID. So what happened is, of course, COVID happened in the 2020s and everyone went online. And then all of a sudden, this course did so well in the first year of COVID. It was like more than 100 attendees in that course. And I was thinking, there's a lot of money being made here by the association that's actually charging for it. And what if I get that independence and people pay me instead of paying a different association for that? And this is where the idea was born, and kind of thinking about, I have a lot of value here. Obviously, it's validated by people taking the course. Why don't I package that in a product and then see if I can sell it myself? This is where the struggle started, and the understanding that there's a lot more that goes into a business other than a validated idea.
So, one question that I like to ask all our guests is, can you identify some specific moments that inspired you, made you believe you could be, or connected you to what ended up being a career in science?
So for me, it's quite interesting because my journey started on the engineering side of things. So I was very interested in obviously video games at some point and also Pixar movies. And this was back in the 90s before I went to university. And I was also thinking, yeah, how can we basically use these upcoming technologies to understand more about how humans work and what motivates humans and why they do the things that they do? Because I was seeing that this had a huge impact on everyone. This is what drew me into the university in the first place. And then as part of that journey, I really became more and more interested in the human psyche and what really makes humans tick when they interact with technology, and what are the barriers for us to be efficient with this technology. And so this is what brought me into this whole technological cycle. And then basically I went from technology and the focus on, okay, let's build a system, to let's study how people perceive that system and how these technological systems that we're building can improve people's lives. And so this started with video games, and now it's of course moving into the area of generative AI, where I also want to understand where people get deceived by that technology as well. So a huge strand of our current research is exactly in that direction, to see, is there a potential for deception, and how does that actually unfold in how these technologies are delivered? Because we do have to be not just seeing the benefits of it, but also the potential downsides.
Have you ever played Portal?
I love Portal. Yes, it was one of my gateway drugs to video games for sure.
When I heard the words deception and interfacing with technology, I just thought about how the cake is a lie. Reflecting on the work that you've done as a scientist, is there anything that stands out as particularly impactful in terms of bringing other people into science?
For me, it's really trying to remove the friction of the process of science. I think science sometimes comes across to people as this ultimate complex thing that is so difficult to get into, so why even bother? I do not agree with that. I think more people should adopt an experimental mindset and adopt the scientific method in their practice just to see how cause and effect work. I think it's really important for people to go through this process of thinking about knowledge, testing if that knowledge applies in the real world, and then getting results that let them trust that knowledge. I think trust is becoming obviously more important as AI allows more fake things to appear in the world, and it's getting easier and easier. Like even 5 years ago, video was still the ultimate proof of something happening. We know that's not true anymore because AI can realistically fake any kind of video now. And as this perception is shifting, I think it's really important for people to have a better relationship to science, a better relationship to some of the principles that Karl Popper talks about, and this idea of falsification that you can have a theory, but if the theory is untouchable, if it becomes dogma, that's not really science. Science needs to have room for somebody to prove you wrong. And in your attitude, you also need to adopt the attitude that you can be wrong and whatever may be challenged. I think this is really, really important as we are moving politically into a much more dogmatic phase of international politics, even, as well as into a phase where people are bombarded with so much information as ChatGPT does generate this type of information. And so it is even more important for people to have this critical ability to debunk information, to make up their own minds, and to become a little bit of a scientist themselves. So for me, the main mission here is to make science accessible to everyone.
It's wonderful. It sounds like a lot of your work and your mission interacts with we've got technology here, and how are humans getting value, believing, and learning from that technology?
That's a really good way to put it. Knowing that the technology is there, but not treating technology as something that's here to enslave us or to be a barrier for things. I think we're moving to an era where technology can really enhance a lot of the things that we do. But we have to be aware of the downsides of this as well. If we become overly reliant on certain technologies, then we're losing certain skills and abilities to do other things. I am definitely an optimist that sees more of the positive potential here, but I'm also very aware of the dangers and downsides of it because at the end of the day, a lot of these technologies that we have in our lives today are fortifiers and amplifiers. They make whatever we want to make easier and better, but this starts with intention. So if your intentions are bad, they can probably also amplify those bad intentions.
It makes a lot of sense. With the advent of the internet, that we're running into those generations that existed before the internet. But with the advent of the internet, a lot of the concern was, doesn't this give people a platform to do bad things? And the same thing with Bitcoin. You can do bad things or good things depending on the intention of the human who's running it. The biggest concern I've heard from people who are against AI have said, my concern is any technology can be used for good or evil, but what happens when the technology can decide how it's used? Can AI even decide that at this point? I'd just love to know what your perspective on that is.
No, it's very interesting. I think this is really digging into this area that Silicon Valley is all hot about right now, which is this idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI, is the big buzzword these days, which essentially means that, right? Like the intelligence itself makes the decisions for things. I think decision making at its heart is ultimately a very human process, and we shouldn't forget that this should remain human for critical decisions, but that decisions are also rules and can be formulaic and can be baked into systems. So obviously, with AI becoming more powerful, a lot of decision making can be automated and will be automated. And yes, if you trust the Nobel Prize winners like Hinton and others, they are saying that within the next 10 years, this is definitely going to happen. And there is, of course, a shift that's happening with that. And there's a danger attached to that. But I think the danger is essentially in how the humans are interacting with that system. The danger is based on the system as well, but it is not going to be like Skynet, Terminator style, that there is going to be an intelligence that all of a sudden decides to wipe us out. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the more risky version of that is that we have a decision making system, and maybe at the beginning, it will be something that just introduces friction where it shouldn't introduce the friction, as in it gives pushback to certain things because they're not optimized or whatever, because humans are messy in their decision making and sometimes very messy in the way that they embrace things. It can be things where if you're struggling with a mental disorder or some personal challenges and you think you can use artificial intelligence to overcome that instead of a human trained doctor, that you end up with tragedy. And we're seeing this, of course, in the news headlines these days, that we have suicides that are tied to the use of artificial intelligence because a recommendation that came from the chatbot was essentially in a certain direction. Those are the real risks that are already attached to that. I think more than ever, it is important to fortify and train our minds than before, because we now do not only have to be vigilant and strong. Maybe we don't have to be that strong anymore because we have all this technology that makes things easier. So we don't really have to work out, but it's good for our health and it makes us live longer, right? So there's that benefit. So that's important. But I think more than ever, it's important not to sloth through life, because that slothing can be replaced and will be replaced by AI. Like the simple things are already being replaced a lot. But also at the higher level, the white collar jobs where we're currently in, like those are also being replaced. And these are like complex decision making tasks that we're doing there. So for those, it is important that we still remain with the ability to critically assess what is happening in that situation so that then we can act upon it. I think the danger is, and this is something that we're seeing in academia right now as well, I'm very attuned to that because of the whole paper publishing process, is that you know this as well. Like the publications are rising exponentially, which is insane. We don't have enough reviewers to review all of the publications that are being published these days. And because people are now using AI to publish their papers, there is, of course, this downside of breaking a process that was supposed to vet things and vet facts and make sure that we're basing our knowledge on something that's tried and true. And I think there is a risk if we're eroding science in that way, then we're also opening the floodgates for our knowledge itself shifting. Because if we can't trust the facts, it becomes much, much harder to every individual to be skeptical about everything. So we're shifting in this difficult era where, yes, on the one hand, I'm urging everyone to become a mini scientist, but on the other hand, it also means it is much more work sifting and digesting information and making decisions based on that information so that you can live a happy and fulfilled life, because there will be bad actors that will push you in a direction that might not be as easy for you to deal with.
I'm pulling on this idea how you mentioned your discipline of science really disseminates their knowledge through conferences more than publications, and that there's this huge exponential increase, as you said, with AI integration in publication cycles. Based on what you know and your experiences, where do you see the future of academic publication going?
I think it is the most important question that we should be asking ourselves as scientists. One of the things that I see happening is we need to move away as scientists from the traditional publishing model. As this is completely broken, there are incentives there for publishers to charge a lot of money to libraries, charge a lot of money to scientists to do publishing that essentially costs $0, right? So that's a scam on the outset as it is, because the way that the publication system works is it just makes certain people richer. Peer reviewers review for free, scientists write there for free. Why the heck do we have a middleman that is billion-dollar companies like Elsevier and others? I'm looking at you, Elsevier, like I'm looking at those guys that are filling their pockets. It's not okay. So in those moments, we really have to think about how can we make that model better. And I know that some colleagues are trying these community-based peer-driven models with open peer review. There's, of course, downsides. The problem is that these are very fortified publication systems that have established themselves over years. And so it's really hard to soften them up and to create alternatives that are better. But I just read this post or actually I've read a couple of these posts on LinkedIn from a couple of different accounts from people that are saying, I'm getting 230 citations on my papers. And last year, from my LinkedIn posts alone, I got 2 million impressions. What is the difference? Now, of course, you have to understand an impression doesn't necessarily mean people have read that entire thing. So sure, they had some dwell time, they spent some time on it, but have they actually read and understood it? Maybe not the same as somebody citing you. But then again, as a scientist, I also know from people citing my work, some people don't read my work, but they still cite it. And they just read the title, okay? So there's that as well. So there's these downsides. Because we have these public distribution channels like social media that are used for marketing essentially these days, the social on social media has disappeared, right? Like it used to be something where you see your neighbor's dog and your friends and people on vacation. You used to enjoy that. That's not there anymore. Everything is these personalized For You feeds are, if you're on Instagram or Facebook, any meta platform, it's all designed to push product for you so that you click on these targeted ads. And if you're on other platforms, it's designed maybe to stir you up. If you're on X, a very toxic place, right? Like it's all designed for upsetting you because that gets eyeballs and keeps you on the platform. And then in other places like Substack, this is actually an interesting one. So Substack, where it empowers the authors and is trying to use some of that social media concept, but it's actually enabling publications. Now, if somebody was smart, they would build something like Substack where you essentially incentivize two things. You incentivize publication. Substack already does that because you can have paid publications. People can pay to read your stuff. But also that incentivize peer review. And there's a couple of systems like that as well. I think Pabloons is one of those, where you actually get incentivized to do the review. You get like kudos and other stuff. But at the end of the day, if you got cold hard cash to peer review other things, and you'd have some sort of a social media system underneath it, where instead of the likes and reposts or whatever, you have these peer endorsements that actually show you whether or not other scientists agree with the thing that's being published, I think you have a much better, much more regulated system than these paywalled academic traditional publishers that are currently just keeping that knowledge away from the public. This is also something that's not okay, right? Like the general public doesn't really have easy access to that knowledge. This needs to go away. One of the things that we see in my field, just as a quick add-on to that, is the big publisher there is ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, and they're just in the next year moving their entire digital library, so this is something like an indexed library of all publications, into an open access repository. So these are the moves that we need essentially. An across the board decision from a big publication outlet to say, you know what, we're getting rid of the paywalls. Now, the downsides for that to be feasible for them is that now the authors pay more. So to me, that's not the right solution, where essentially now everyone is suffering because everyone has to pay more for that to happen. I do appreciate stuff like that because it does make things more accessible to the public and it gives you more citations by default for your papers and more people read your stuff. So that's great. But why are the authors the ones that are suffering? Why can't we find a better system where, for example, this could be done on the institution level? And I know this is actually possible right now, so that institutions pay for an account fee or something like that. But usually it is still too high. I don't think the relationship between the cost for this stuff and what it actually costs is good. The profit margins are still too high. Science shouldn't have profit margins like that. And if it does have profit margins like that, they should be set by the individual scientists. If you are a superstar scientist and you want to make your research cost more because it's really good and really rigorous, sure, all the power to you. But why should somebody else make that money off of your cool, smart research that you've built years to establish? And also, like, your profile as a scientist is like publishing over 10 years of really rigorous studies. That stuff's hard, right? So you should be rewarded for that as a scientist, not some random publisher.
It's a very rant-worthy topic, and it's one of the ones that did my entry into scientific entrepreneurship because it was so maddening to me that I was expected to build a career with increasing expectations to publish in a system that I fundamentally don't agree with, where my work is being used to extort others to have to pay even more just to access what I've published. It's wild. I got to a point in time where I was almost forced to pay to access my own paper because I didn't have a copy of it on archive, and then it was behind a paywall and I couldn't figure out how to get around the paywall even as a university student. I think the publication system has become a huge bottleneck for scientists.
I agree.
That doesn't even count the negative impact it has had on society's trust and connection to science. It's just too expensive as a whole for us to keep doing this system. If you had to design something to replace it, would it be conferences? Would it be other publishing models? Would it be video? What would you replace it with?
Yeah, I think this social media system that I talked about, a Substack for scientists, where you're empowering the individual authors. And it doesn't even have to be kudos, but like something where basically you incentivize peer reviews. Right now, the way that the system is structured, it only incentivizes publication numbers, right? Which is also why we have these paper mills and all of this crap that's happening out there, where people are gaming the system to a degree that is corroding science, and it is actually making bad for public trust, but it's also bad for us as scientists because it becomes harder for us. If we're doing a systematic review or something like that, it is more work now because there's more papers that we have to sift through to find the actual ones that are good. It's eroding everything, and that is really problematic. So I think it is the job of the scientists that do believe in rigor and do believe in some of these principles to essentially build their own mini outlets. You know how you in Medium, how you can basically create your own publication? What if we had something like that? A university could create their own publication in the academic Substack system or whatever, and they could then charge a fee because they have distribution built in. They already have MIT, thousands of people will show up, right? That is happening with their social media anyways. So if they build something like that, I'm sure they would funnel people in there. You know how this system works. You're an entrepreneur yourself. You need a traffic engine somewhere. The traffic engine at the beginning will come from social media. It will bring eyeballs and people to these sort of publications that we have. And then it should be up to the authors and maybe the institutions to charge for these publications. But this should all be done in the best interest of the science itself. So why even charge for reading an article? I don't see the value in any of that. There shouldn't be a charge in disseminating knowledge. It is your job as a scientist to bring the knowledge out in the world. So why even paywall that in the first case? That does not make sense. But if there are any perks, if there are any things like maybe if after the article, instead of how we currently disseminate, which is write the thing, write it in the IMRAD structure, introduction, method, results, and discussion, and then that way it becomes easy and accessible and whatnot, and people can skim through that article if they're scientists and they're trained on doing that and find the things that matter to them. What if we take that one step further? We break up the traditional IMRAD structures, and you can actually see that with some publications already doing that, where it's like key points, and you have to 5 bullet points that go at the beginning that are actually like more accessible to the public. Here's the 5 main things that you should take out of this article, or graphical abstracts, right? Like some publication outlets have these graphical abstracts that are like my infographics that are really quickly showing people what's up, right? Of course, that needs a skill and that's difficult, but this is stuff that you could essentially monetize. You could charge for these sort of bonus things that makes things easier. At the end of the day, I'm conflicted about that because I feel like anything that makes science more accessible to the public should be frictionless. But I do understand the standpoint that we can't work for free. As scientists, we got to get paid, right? So there needs to be a balance between that. You need to pay people for their work. So if a scientist provides knowledge to you, you need to understand that just because you have the right to access that knowledge doesn't mean that they just have to live off of thin air, right? They still need to make a living somehow. So there's a really tricky question to find good models there that on the one hand pay the scientists for their work, but on the other hand somehow make this stuff easier accessible for the public.
Charging for knowledge in today's day and age, when it's so readily available in so many places, I don't think a feasible business model going forward ever again. Charging for access to academic articles, I think, is an outdated practice that should get abolished like years ago. You have to get to the core of why we do this as academics. Why do we publish our research? And I imagine that it comes down to 2 things. One is that it allows us to disseminate our work, which means sharing it with other scientists, sharing it with people, sharing it so that other people can use it, integrate it into their work, and advance the boundary of knowledge. That's our goal. That's why we are PhDs. We're philosophy, not because we're necessarily philosophers, but because we advance what the boundary of knowledge is with every paper we write, ideally. And so I imagine if that's our primary motivation and our secondary motivation is to demonstrate that we have a capacity and reputation for rigorous science to attract governmental funding to our labs to support more science. And that's just my assumption, right? So if those are the two reasons why we publish, then the money model surrounding the support of that should incentivize those two things. So if there were a social media platform or some sort of digital app to which we contribute articles, there's a minimum standard for quality control that we have to follow. It is accessible to people completely for free without even having to log in. But if you want to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, academically speaking, you have to be in the research field in some way. So that might mean that there's some gatekeeping surrounding like institutional logins, credentials. And that's just so that you can give a thumbs up or thumbs down on that work and say, here's a specific part of the paper that I, as a scientist, disagree with, or there's not sufficient data to back this, or this was an overreach, or maybe this sentence is just a dangerous claim to be made in the context of this work. And I, as a scientist, want to say that out loud and have my name tied to it, so that I, Vanessa Rosa, PhD, have an issue with this particular thing, or think that this research is phenomenal and this is something that more people should pay attention to. So that is a more accurate measure of our scientific impact than our index factor, which is just how often we're cited. Then the public, I think, the people who can access this work without having to log in, without having credentials, I think the public should have access to vote up or down the work, so that up means it gets more visibility. And given that it's their tax dollars that pay for the majority of this research, I think the more public support that you have for your resource, for your research, the more funding and resources you should receive. I think those two should be connected, because in that way, the public gets to vote on what research is being advanced. I think that would be a really great system, because now the scientists are getting resources and grants to do more research, which ultimately I think most research scientists want that more than payment. I think more of us just want more funding, more access to resources to build our labs even further and support more of our graduate students. I would argue that we want that more than like money on the side. So I think a system like that would be really valuable. You mentioned before in our conversations that we can utilize AI as an intern to help us make better prompts and get more useful outputs. Can you share some of like your juiciest, best strategies for effectively training AI to do what we as research scientists want and avoid what we don't want?
This is really at the core of my current business model. The idea essentially being I want to train people on how to get the best results with the AI, because what is a lot of fear mongering right now? People are saying don't use AI, or AI is going to just have crappy outputs or whatever. But it is a what you give is what you get situation, right? I've experimented with this enough to know you can get absolutely amazing outputs from AI, but it is all in the process of prompt engineering and context engineering. Those are the two things that I really teach to try to help people. The core thing that a lot of people are, of course, aware by default is that the AI output, because it's such a vast amount of knowledge that needs to get processed here, is very much dependent on the context that you feed it, which is where context engineering comes in, right? The idea essentially that you understand the audience of the output. So this is the first thing you got to have an idea for. Who am I writing for? Who is this AI output for? The purpose of the writing and the constraints of the writing. This is super important. So understanding audience, understanding purpose, understanding constraints are the three core things that are key to every great prompt. So you prime the system so that you get a response that has higher relevance to the thing that you're asking for. And the other thing is, of course, that people always say act as something. Everyone knows that by now, that you ideally put a role in there. The idea of a role for the AI is essentially so that you make sure that it has a context system within which it operates. Now, of course, the better your prompt, the closer you are to a perfect answer, but it is a back and forth. And the context windows, so the windows of tokens or the windows of words that can be processed at any given time, are increasing with GPT-5 and the latest models. They're getting really good. So you can absolutely go from first output, some critique of that output, some polishing of that output, to even better outputs in that process as you go through this, because you tell the AI exactly what you want to get. And then the big problem right now is hallucination, right? Like we want to avoid hallucination as much as possible, because AI will just give us wrong facts and things. And of course, with web search, that has gotten much better. The way that most people avoid this is to splice in either a specific tool. These tools are called RAG tools. So ideally you splice in information that you have. A lot of scientists really like Google Scholar because you can upload up to 50 documents. So you could, in theory, upload your entire related literature. You can, of course, use things like Gobblebot. This is an online tool that you can use where you can also upload up to 50 papers and it'll extract the text and put it all in one nice, juicy little text file that you can then upload into your prompt. And a lot of this is still within the context window because the context windows are several books. So it's very large. Specifically, you use Gemini. Gemini has the largest context window. So it is really great. You can just upload multiple PDFs, put that in there, upload that in your prompt, and then you're using that related work. So if you're doing scientific writing, that's of course something that you want. You want to be able to reference some of these ideas. It'll also give that right context for the AI, and it makes your output much more powerful. You don't just go from scratch. You always do research first before you go into building a really good prompt or really good output. And my research is either coming from Google Scholar or it's coming from some of these specific apps like Consensus, SciSpace, Elicit. Those are all really great apps that you can use to speed up finding of literature. They're all based on semantic search, so basically tying into the Semantic Scholar API. This is very different from our traditional Google Scholar search, where we're still used to Boolean keywords, where we have like this phrase and this phrase or that phrase and so forth. Semantic search is just looking for the semantics of the query. So it can understand if one word means something else if it were paraphrased and things like that. So semantic search is more powerful, but Google Scholar has not adopted that yet. So you're by default limited to whatever's indexed in Google Scholar. And it indexes a lot of free stuff as well. So it indexes archive or bioarchive and all of these free pre-publication platforms. And as pre-publication doesn't mean it's actually going to get published, because some people just put their stuff on there and there's no peer review in that. So you got to be a little bit careful with some of the sources that are coming in through there. You can also use Perplexity if you just do general research. If you do a journalistic style article, I love Perplexity. It's basically replaced Google search for me because you can do these labs things and it runs for 15 minutes, like their agentic thing. And so you give it a very specific query and say, phase 1, phase 2, I want you to do this in different phases and search for these different things. And then I want you to give me a very structured report of all of these different things, and it will give you that, and it's really beautiful. And the thing is, that report that you're getting out of there then can be fed into something else. So to come back to your point of this, how do I train the AI to work like an intern? I go to Perplexity or something like that first to do that research, and then I say, I am hiring a new intern, this is part of my prompt, to do this specific task. And then I break down the task. I try to unbundle the task. I love this aspect of AI prompting because it's very similar to game design. So from my game design days, one of the big things about game design is essentially you have this big thing that you want somebody to achieve. And then if that person gets to that thing, they need to do sub steps to get to that thing. That's this unbundling.
I love Perplexity. I'm obsessed with it as well. I'd love to know more about how you use the labs feature versus the pro versus just the general search, which reasoning system to use.
So my favorite right now is the labs feature. If I have a simple query, like the stuff that you would type in Google, I just use the regular search, right? It's not as quick as Google, but it will be much better. Then the research feature is basically where you have something that you know is not too complex of a task, because this will run for 3 to 5 minutes and you want to just get that breakdown. So I do that for quick step-by-step breakdown. So I will say, I'm going to do a peer review of this specific paper in this specific area. Here are my 5 criteria. Can you break down each of those 5 criteria into more sub-steps? So I use it for this unbundling mechanism that I like to do. And then you want to give it these constraints and it will run you through that pretty quickly and you don't have to wait for too long. Now, when I want to go super deep, like when I write my newsletters and things like that, then I use the labs feature. And I really go into, so today I want to teach this thing. So basically for labs, I adopt the teacher mindset. I would say I'm hiring an intern to learn this task, whatever it is, to learn concepts of perception in psychology or something like that. The goal is for this intern to be able to explain the 5, let's say, or 7 or whatever have you, depending on your background knowledge of the field, you might have a hunch of how many core concepts of perception. And then in the next step, I will probably give it some context. So I really like that. Ideally, I have how I want these things to look like in the output, as in concept one, and then these curly brackets, output one, step two, dot, 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 so that the AI knows this is the kind of structured output that I'm looking for. It's usually that's where it gets pretty long. So then we'll say example, colon, and then concept and whatever the output should look like. And then at the end of it, I will say, I need from you tables of this thing with these columns, for example, if I have a very structured output. So usually with labs, I love to get tables because it's really nice for comparison. So tables of A, B, C, whatever it is, whatever comparison you're making. Then next, I need step-by-step listicle instructions because everyone loves a listicle. And if you follow Ali Abdaal on YouTube, he said basically everything on social media, everything that people consume is a listicle. And that's not bad, right? There is some truth to that. People love listicles. They love step-by-step structures. So you work with that and then you just say, at the very end, and I want you to output this as a markdown formatted file with 8,000 words or whatever have you. It won't do 8,000 words, but it'll do like 3,000 words, something like that. Specifically, if you use Gemini, then you get a bigger window for that stuff. If I know I want the depth of output, then what I do is essentially I use Gemini over ChatGPT or over Claude because I know it'll be a bit chunkier in its response and I get a little bit more output than the others because just the context windows are bigger.
I know that a lot of researchers are hesitant to use AI for their writing, mostly I think because they're worried about plagiarism. Our fields are very heavily focused on who am I citing? Where did that research originate? We're trained in that a lot of the time. But what we can't control necessarily with AI is concerns about plagiarism. So, how have you navigated those concerns, and what advice would you give to researchers on responsibly incorporating AI to their workflow?
About this like fact checking thing, this is also a great follow-up prompt in Perplexity. And then just to select that academic slider, because you can select like web search, academic, and social, I think. And so if you just select the academic slider and say, can you please fact check the last output, you get like excellent links to all the semantic scholar stuff that will back some of that up. So this is really helpful when you do the fact checking. I would always do that with Perplexity first. Plagiarism is really difficult because one of the things that you might notice if you use something like the web search in ChatGPT, this even happened in GPT-5 for me, that I gave it a bunch of articles and I said, this is the kind of information that I'm looking for, but I want to write this as a step-by-step thing about this particular thing. Please reference the articles. And it would reference the articles. And the interesting thing is once I clicked on that little number link and it would lead me to that article, I would then of course read that article because I want to know, am I like, is this bogus or is it making that up? And I would see that it will actually rip apart sentence structures from the articles. Now this is, keep in mind, this is a particular prompt where I actually fed it URLs. So I did point it to something in particular. And I think the more specific you are, the higher the risk of it actually taking something verbatim from that thing and reusing it is. So then I clicked on that article. I found, okay, so it's basically used a sentence structure that's exactly the same as that published article. But what was more interesting is that article referenced another article, which also was referenced in that output piece that I got from ChatGPT 5. But that reference wasn't in ChatGPT 5. That reference was a sublink of the reference that I had clicked on to do that verification bit. So it was one part removed from that. It wasn't indexed anywhere in ChatGPT as a source, but it was an exact sentence from that exact next article that ChatGPT reused. And at that point, I'm like, whoa, okay, you gotta really be careful because it will rip apart stuff from the internet, specifically when you feed it specific directions. It will rip apart that stuff and reuse it without even paraphrasing it. So the risk of plagiarism in that moment is pretty high. Now, of course, there's a couple of things to deal with that. One is how you would in regular writing. Usually what people do is paraphrase. So you could always ask it to paraphrase if you're going through that. The downside of paraphrasing is you're losing the sources. You might not even know the sources that this is pointing to, but it might not be relevant in your context. You might just want to have a paraphrased piece about A, B, C, D, whatever it is, right? So again, depending on what you're writing. If you're writing an academic article, of course, you do want to have the right references. But in that case, one of the things I recommend is to use that technique that I said earlier to either go into Notebook LM, and then in Notebook LM to have it reference each of these bits and pieces to, or if you have ideas and concepts that you see, let's say you're writing your introduction section, you're seeing, okay, this is concept A, concept B, concept C, to see out of which papers that is coming from. Because you have your 50 papers from your related work, they're sitting in Notebook LM, and then you can prompt which papers talk about concept X, because that is the concept that ChatGPT gave you as you're writing your introduction, let's say. And then it will find those exact, most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, sometimes Notebook LM gets the reference wrong, but most of the time it will find the exact spot in that paper where that is mentioned. And then you know that you're safe to cite that paper, because you still need to cite it manually, right? Like you need to know the reference of that paper, but you know exactly where in that paper it is because you've queried that in Notebook LM. That double checking is really important. At the end of the day, one of the things that worries me the most is students wanting to shortcut that process. As it is, I already find it very difficult to train my master's / early PhD students to do enough reading, right? This was even a problem before ChatGPT came along. Because as reading scientific papers is not the most fun exercise. A lot of them are really dry and boring. This is a whole different discussion. We need to do a better job at writing. Part of my mission, again, make your writing better so people enjoy reading it. You get an 8,000, 10,000 word paper. That'll take you probably all day, maybe 2 days if you're just getting started, because it's information heavy, it's dense, and you got to get through that. And then what I tell my students is minimum expectations is you're going to read 50 or 100 of that a year. That's a pretty tight schedule of regularly reading stuff, and that usually doesn't happen very quickly. It takes them a long time to get into that habit. But even if you read fewer of these, I know that there's a lot of people on LinkedIn and whatnot, a lot of people selling courses on this where they're like pitching these shortcuts, and there's a shortcut for everything. Yeah, sure. You get to the results quicker, but the knowledge is not there. So there is no shortcut to building the knowledge when you're building a PhD. So if you actually want a PhD, read the damn thing first. Then you can use all the shortcuts that you want to reference it. You still cannot go without that process of actually knowing who said what in what context. And you don't need to even remember the entire paper, but I think one of the things as you're building your knowledge base is to understand which paper is which concept. One of the things that I teach for that is a literature review matrix. You've probably used these as well if you ever did related work. It's a really simple way to keep track of these concepts, and there's great knowledge management tools for that available these days. The free one obviously is Obsidian. Notion is also fantastic. You could even just have an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc for it and just do it in there. But really, yeah, that's something you want to build. You want to build that muscle and have that available. Even just taking notes in your Zotero installation will do that for you, because Zotero is super searchable these days as well, so it makes it really easy to keep track of that.
We're at the point where we should probably start our closing ceremony for the podcast episode. What we do for that on this channel is we have a previous guest who has asked a question to you, and then you get to ask a question to our next guest. Our last guest was Cesar Nufio of the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. He develops these incredible multimedia learning resources for different topics in science. And his question was for people who do things outside of academia. This would connect to your entrepreneurship. What was the most important thing that you had to unlearn to be able to start that?
I think the most important thing to unlearn was to feel bad about selling, basically. As academics, we're conditioned that we shouldn't sell anything. If you ever heard Dan Pink speak, he's an academic, a prolific one, but he's also a great entrepreneur and written really great books. And I think he says something like everything is sales. Welcome to your life. Everything is sales, basically. So you always have to sell something. And as academics, we're often so far removed from that idea that we could be selling something. And that is such a limiting, problematic mindset that we just instantly feel bad when we ask somebody to give us something back for the value that we provide. I think that really limits a lot of people from actually acknowledging their value in the first place. And of course, this starts with indoctrination during the PhD and other phases that we go through, that we really get pushed away from understanding that we're making a really valuable contribution to society. And that stuff should cost money. If a football player can ask for millions just for people to watch them play football, why shouldn't we ask for millions for people to see us do science or read the kind of output of our science, right? As a society, of course, there are challenges attached to that, but I think this is definitely one of the key things if you become an academic entrepreneur to understand that people are always selling stuff. Yes, and as an entrepreneur, you're actually starting to ask for money for value. But even if you're just an academic and not an entrepreneur, you're still selling a paper, you're selling an idea, you're selling a concept, you're selling a program to a funder, you're selling your knowledge to your students in the classroom. Like it's all a similar concept. So you got to embrace that.
I love that. Embracing the business end of your industry and not running from it as this antithetical perspective of I'm a scientist, I'm here to give, not to get.
Yeah.
Dissolving that a little bit and recognizing that value exchanges are a core part of society. I love that. And so our next guest is going to be Matt Wilkins. Matt is the founder of Galactic Polymath Education Studios, and he helps researchers and nonprofits connect their work to K through 12 classrooms. So I'd love to know, what questions do you have for Matt? Or what one question do you have for Matt?
My question for him is what is the biggest challenge for him to translate complex mathematical concepts to early learners, young learners in the classroom? Like, what are his biggest challenges? I would love to know that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then before we sign off for the day, I really wanted to share your YouTube channel here. You mentioned in our conversations that one of your goals is to grow this during your sabbatical that's coming up. And I'd love to know, what strategies are you considering to build a more engaged audience? And what have you learned about effectively doing that?
Yeah, so this is something I think everyone that is trying to build an audience on social media is facing, is that it's really tricky. Not only do you have to be very consistent in terms of delivering content, and this is on any platform, whether it is X is where I started, and then I went to LinkedIn, and now I really want to move this to YouTube. The barrier with YouTube is, of course, the barrier of entry is so much higher because now, as you can see in that AI academics that you're just showing, you can actually see a nice progression. If you look at the very right hand side, which is a thumbnail I did 2 months ago, which was very rudimentary. And now the thumbnails that I'm doing now are looking way more professional. And of course, I did some tutorials and stuff like that to understand, yeah, you need to have very strong colors. People love melting stuff for some reason on thumbnails. So that study mode has, or not the study mode, the other one has something melting underneath the box or something like that. But you can see the stars are melting in that from ChatGPT to AI. You can see those little sparkles are melting away. So that's apparently something that YouTube is like. So the one on the left has the little rainbow circle around the ChatGPT. So that's also something I'm testing with because people love colors. That's a big thing for growing YouTube, is understanding there's packaging. It's a click and then watch platform. So you got to get the click first. So you have to invest a lot of time understanding the thumbnail. So I plan to understand my thumbnails better so that people actually click on the stuff in the first place. And then right now, this is just a podcast. So I actually want to work more on writing these smaller chunked videos that are 15, 20 minutes, where I'm just teaching one simple concept and making that more accessible. And then, of course, what I'm thinking why this is a good strategy for any entrepreneur listening to this is that one of the things I've noticed, stuff gets stolen a lot. So as soon as I have something that gets viral, I can guarantee you somebody will steal it and repost it somewhere because it's proven content. I've proven this gets a lot of views. And this happened to me, I think last year. I'm going to repost it on LinkedIn soon, a post on how to write a research proposal. And I actually found it. It's like these scammy academic institutions that are offering writing help with some weird 1-800 number. And they are reusing my post, but they've taken my post and they've actually fed it to ChatGPT, told it to remove my branding, which is what they did.
Wow.
And it actually has botched some of the words in my infographic as well. And they're reposting that thing, but it's still, even that botched version still performs well for them. So they're reposting that on Facebook. I've even seen some people do that on LinkedIn without any credit to me as the originator of that work. And just to, of course, drive traffic to their scammy services. This is something that will always happen on social media. It's a very frustrating part of the job. But one of the things that I like about YouTube, it happens on YouTube too. People steal like entire YouTube scripts and re-record themselves doing that, which I think is absolutely nuts. But one of the things that's easy on YouTube is it's you as a person speaking to the camera. So I think YouTube is going to be much more, for my channel anyway, is going to be much more about the vibe. I want you to get a vibe for me, as you did in this podcast with Vanessa as well, so that you know what kind of person I am. And then you can decide if you want to work with me or if you want to buy my product. So then I think it's a much easier decision making for you to understand, is this a person I'm vibing with? Is this somebody that I actually would consider giving money to and buying products from? And I think that's why YouTube is a great strategy. I'm going to see how that goes for the next year.
I hope it goes really well. And from the content that I can see, it is going really well. And I'm just really excited for your message about using AI responsibly, but also being able to scale our efforts as scientists and building our capacity to be entrepreneurs. With the federal disinvestment going the way that in the United States, I think it's going to be essential to figure out how else can I attract resources to my lab so that the research can continue at that same level of rigor, if not higher? I think the conversation that you've provided here is wonderful. And I've just got one last question for you. I had so much fun talking with you. You're a wonderful guest, and I'm just so excited to see what you do next. I hope we can remain friends and connected as colleagues. And just thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun.
Absolutely.